These are my top 5 synths I've ever reviewed on this channel. What's up and welcome back to another video. So I just got back from Japan and I'm still jet lagged, but I'm working on what is probably the most epic video ever to come on my channel, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I figured this would be a good time, since I've gotten a lot of new subscribers, welcome by the way, to go over a retrospective of some previous stuff I've reviewed. Now, every single one of these synths I have videos on my channel, so definitely go check out some of my old archives if you're new here and you've discovered my channel recently. Since I first started this synth channel as a side project about 4 years ago, I've been lucky enough to review and demo many of the greatest modern synths of our time, both cheap and expensive. So these 5 synths are just the ones that, in no particular order, I've had the most fun with reviewing, demoing. Many of them I still have today, and I use all the time on my own music. A quick caveat, I'm actually not going to include the OB6 or Third Wave because I feel like I've talked about those two synths ad nauseum, and they are just clearly the two synths I use the most and I recommend the most on the channel. So this list should actually be my top 5 synths on this channel besides the OB6 and Third Wave. With that out of the way, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let's get started. Starting off in number 5, the Korg Prologue. Now, the Korg Prologue was my first ever hardware synth that I bought. I saved up a ton of money for it back in the day. I'd been using only VSTs and had been really interested in getting hardware, and I did a ton of research and ended up going between the Prologue or the Rev 2. And when I bought the Prologue, I was blown away. It has 16 VCOs, one of the most unique filters on any polysynth that sounds almost like the MS-20, a really unique third digital oscillator, and some pretty solid effects, honestly. I could not understand for the life of me why nobody was talking about this synth, so one of the first videos I ever made on this channel was why I like the Korg Prologue, and I think honestly to this day, that video helped a lot of people decide and see why the Korg Prologue is so great. But anyways, suffice to say, the Prologue sounds amazing. The fact that Korg had to discontinue it, likely due to bad sales, is a crime. And while I'm not advocating for buying synths as investments, I truly think that in the next 10 or 20 years, once these are harder to find, they're gonna go up in value because people will realize that it's such a unique piece of kit. The build quality is incredible. Like I've said this before, the Prologue is built better than most of my Moog and sequential synths. It's just a rock solid, made in Japan, like metal and wood frame, and it's an amazing synth. It sounds great. It's currently in storage because I don't have space, but I look forward to using it again on a future project. Coming in number 4, the Motor Synth Mark II. Now, the Game Changer Audio Motor Synth Mark II is arguably the most unique synth I've ever reviewed on this channel. I was lucky enough to get to demo one a while ago, and in fact, I did get to keep it, which was super cool. And honestly, the Motor Synth, it's not a gimmick. I've used it on a ton of my darker and more industrial tracks, especially around like the film score, movie trailer music. I really wish that Game Changer Audio would make a mono synth or Eurorack module with the same sound, but just less motors and less voices, because the cost, yes, it is high for what is arguably a pretty niche and unique synth, but I truly think nothing else sounds like the Motor Synth. When I first plugged in and fired up the Motor Synth in my studio, I was completely blown away by the sound. Like, if you're looking for a synth that sounds different, if you've left comments before like, oh no, it's just another poly synth with a Moog filter or a Prophet filter, then the Motor Synth is for you. Nothing else sounds like this, and the motor waveform, when you start getting into some tips and tricks with cross-modulating the different motors together, it's one of the most unique synths in the world, and I was so blown away by how good it is, not only for the really distorted and heavy stuff that you probably expect, but also for those beautiful pads as well. Coming in at number 3, the mighty Oberheim OBX8. Now, most of you probably saw this coming since I'm not allowed to include the OB6, but yeah, I just love Oberheim synthesizers, and the OBX8, again, it's an expensive one, but it's one of the few synths that the first day I plugged it in, I put on my headphones, I was playing it dry with no effects, and I just started laughing because of how great it sounded. Even something as simple as just a basic saw wave with a little bit of vintage knob going into that SEM filter with a bit of resonance sounds just stupendously good on the OBX8. And I really think that now, especially that the price has come a bit more in line with the Profits and the OB6, it's just such a great synth. If you have any interest in like vintage 80s synth sounds, this has got to be on your list. I've done 2 videos on it and it's beautiful. It's so well built. It sounds so good. And a theme you're probably seeing in a lot of these synths so far, in fact, all of them, is I always go for character over features. I don't care that the OBX8 only has one real LFO and then a vibrato LFO. I don't care that it's limited for how expensive it is. It just sounds so good and it's a real instrument to play that I sit down at, I feel inspired, and the sound is just incredible. Coming in at number 2, one that may or may not be a surprise to you depending on how well you know my music and how long you've watched this channel, the Moog Sub 37. Now, the Moog Sub 37 was actually the first hardware synth I ever got in my studio. Back when it first came out, I saved a bunch of money as a broke college student and rented it for a month. And that is pretty much the gateway drug that made me start to just really save money for a synthesizer and really start to research the world of hardware. I remember taking the rental Moog Sub 37 out of the box and plugging it in and just starting to like jam over demos I had and being blown away by how fun it felt just to have a tangible synth that you could pretty much not make it sound bad. The build quality and the UI is a design perfection. Everything from the knob layout to the way it feels to the slant, the build quality, it's just one of the best synths ever. Anytime you want like more heft in the low end, more weights, more of a saturated mid bass, whatever you want to throw at it, Moog will do the job. It also does awesome leads. The only thing I will say is that the keyboard is pretty bad quality. So a tip, if they still do this, I sent mine in, paid about $400 and got them to replace the keyboard with the better quality subsequent keyboard while keeping the sound engine exactly the same because I prefer the saturated sound of the Moog Sub 37. It's a masterpiece synth and I'm never gonna sell it. Coming in finally at number 1, the Erica Synths Percons HD01 drum synth. Now, most of you probably didn't see this coming, that I would rate this so highly, but if you haven't seen my video, go watch it now and you'll see why. Now, you might not guess this from listening to my Miles Away original music with how melodic and beautiful it is, but heavy music is what I grew up on. I played in metal bands growing up, and nowadays Mick Gordon is probably my biggest musical influence. I've studied his Doom soundtracks over and over again, and the Erica Synths Percons HD01 is the single piece of gear, in my opinion, nothing else comes close, that allows me to replicate those kinds of heavy industrial sounds that I've fallen in love with, do them live on the go with the best workflow ever, with amazing sound quality, build quality, and then sync it to other equipment like my DAW or my Poly and Play. It's just such a powerhouse, and it filled a gap in my studio that I didn't know I needed. The Erica Synths Percons HD01 is the kind of piece of gear that, while I won't use it on every single track, if I'm ever feeling uninspired or just want to have fun after a hard day and jam, I take it out, I'll jam live. Even my fiance loves the Percons HD01. I'll be doing some live jams and stuff in the kitchen for her. It's just such a fun piece of gear, and to me, it's what hardware synths are all about. Being in the moment and watching the sound be manipulated live by your movements, getting these happy accidents, and getting so much character out of the sound. I would simply not be able to do these kinds of performances and sounds with VSTs unless I mapped a million macros to a bunch of MIDI controllers, which, to be honest, doesn't sound like that much fun. And at the end of the day, we do this because it's fun. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I want to create a dialogue, so let me know in the comments what your favorite synthesizers are. I'm really curious and I read every single comment. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the big videos coming up on the channel.